I'm Adam Benay, and my film is a short called Petal Fall.
So welcome, Adam. It's always, a treat to. These interviews are great, but I'll be biased. Especially great to be talking to a Middlebury alumnus. Welcome back. One of the things I wanted to ask you about your story. You're a teacher, and a filmmaker, and this film is about a teacher. How was it? At what point did your classroom experience become material for not a documentary, but for a fictional feature?
Actually, a lot of this was taken from my classroom experience of being a student too.
Interesting.
My parents are both educators here in Vermont, and I always kind of had inside baseball for how schools worked and how a classroom functioned. And so when I was a kid going through school, and I really liked school, and I tried to understand, well, why do other kids not like school so much?
Yeah.
And having parents who work with kids really helped with that. So a lot of the story, particularly since it's about a Vermont classroom, comes from being a student. And then as I got older, hearing about why my parents did what they did, and then I kind of fell into the profession, and certainly then everything that they had told me in terms of both the difficulty of being a teacher, but also the joy of being a teacher, just proved so absolutely true. And so when it came time to really fine tune everything about the script, it just all fell into place.
So the film opens. It's a wonderful moment with I don't want to say the protagonist, because I feel like the student is also a protagonist in the film, but the adult protagonist, let's say, the teacher is on a run. Again, bucolic Vermont setting. It's unmistakable. But we're given a little glimpse into her interior monologue about what she is focused on, what she's worried about, and at first, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. It seems like she's thinking about her biological children. Is how I took that.
Oh, cool.
And then then you see her in the classroom, and it's like, oh, this is her feeling. One of the things I've heard from teachers is they don't understand that our work doesn't begin and end when we walk in and out of a classroom. It's all consuming. And you show that at the very beginning. That
is something I definitely take from being a teacher. It's one of actually the hardest parts too, because when you become invested, there are positive ways that happen. Like, I will sometimes lay awake in bed thinking oh, that would be a good lesson, or on the flip side of that, being replaying a moment that you feel like you let a kid down, or that you didn't do a purely positive interaction with a kid, and you just play that again and again and again in your head. And again, like I said, with my parents, that all came back to, when I said goodnight at night, they were talking about, just together, having conversations about kids. And so that it certainly was natural to have her thinking about that as she does literally anything else in her day.
And when we see that with the interaction with her husband and the very separate professional lives they lead, it's stark. And I felt it a little bit, I've worked at Middlebury now for 20 years. My father was a college professor, and I always felt like there was the people who lived an academic life, and then there were people who, I don't know, real jobs
Yeah,
in the world.
exactly.
And that's what
Yeah.
we see. You know,
Yeah.
she's going to stay in the office before the faculty meeting working on stuff. And he's like, but I got us a reservation at the hip restaurant on
Yeah.
Church Street.
Yeah.
It's a small scene, but really important, I think, to
Thank you.
to
Yeah, I
show
hope that
how all-consuming an educator's life is.
Yeah, that really was something with my peers as I got into the real world.
Yeah.
To see the level of excitement about going to a restaurant or going on a vacation, and I was like, well, for me, a vacation is just not teaching. I don't have to go anywhere
Right. I'm gonna sit in
or
a chair and
do
read.
anything. Yeah, exactly. And with the same thing with reservation, like it's like, okay, well, I have to be in bed by 9,
Right,
so if
right.
you make a reservation.
Right.
And I like recently was talking to a friend who was talking about deciding between two jobs, and he kept using the word work-life balance, and I just tuned out, and
Yeah.
I was like, I just don't get what he's
done
talking
right.
about.
Yeah.
And afterwards I reflected on that and was like, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but work-life balance to me is basically like another
Right.
language.
Right. Work is life.
Yeah,
And life is
yeah,
work.
yeah.
How was it working with the child actors? I mean, they were amazing.
Thank you.
And you know, so how did you cast the film, and then how did you direct?
Yeah, that would not have happened without my mom, Julie Benay, who is a Vermonter. She grew up in Jericho, and her mom was an educator. Actually, like started a school in Jericho,
Right.
and so my mom has basically lived her entire life making relationships with people in the world of education.
Okay.
And also, she was a principal as well as a teacher. So I said to her, how do I get kids, right? Like I remember being a kid and doing theater, but how do you make those inroads? And she said, email. You just email principals. So the biggest thing was emailing, I think, so every principal in every school for, if they were like anywhere between 5th and 8th grade, so sometimes that's an elementary school and a middle
Right.
school, sometimes that's just a middle school. Every Addison County, Franklin County, Chittenden County, I think I sent about 65 emails
Okay.
to principals and had various responses. Some were like, yeah, I'm going to put you in touch with this person, which is exactly what my mom said would happen,
Yeah.
right? She's like, they'll delegate.
They'll pass you on.
Yeah,
Right.
and some just flat out said no. The toughest one I got said, because I pitched what the film was going to be about, and I said that the teacher's job was affecting her mental health, and the principal wrote back and said, I don't like that. And I was like, well, I feel sorry for your teachers.
I was going to say that's not a good sign for that school.
Yeah, and thankfully there was a lot of really good responses. I also reached out to some theater groups in the area, and actually the Middlebury network runs deep. I went to school with a couple guys whose dad runs the Very Merry Theater in like the Chittenden County area, who of course he had worked with my mom when she was a teacher, so it's all that Vermont stuff. And so a lot of kids came out from the Very Merry Theater, and then in South Burlington, they just have a strong theater program. And you know, kind of as is the point I would hope of the film, is that one teacher can hopefully make a difference. And what I found was, there's a couple of schools, a few schools where one teacher has fostered an arts community, and so I would have just like an influx of kids from there, but also just like theater groups from around the state.
So, touching on the one teacher who can make a difference, we see her annoyance with this one student in the opening classroom scene. He's acting out. He is ridiculing a classmate. He's smacking things out of people. He's acting out as a middle school child does, and she has her annoyances with him. But it's in the dream sequence where she has the added insight of, we don't know what's going on in this kid's life.
Yeah.
And he literally screams, "You cannot walk in my shoes. You can't fit into my shoes." And there's always, not always, but most of the time there's a reason behind actions. Yeah. And then he goes from kind of the classroom bully to someone that you ache for. And in a way, his face never changes. I mean, he's almost this angelic child even when he's acting out. But in the final act, when we see him on the bike and after she's had this conversation with him and said, "I'm here for you," I don't know if it's his eyes or something changes. And empathy, I guess. Empathy for this person.
Yeah.
How important was it to show that in these kids'
That was
lives?
everything. The whole project came down to this feeling that I know educators, including, like I said, my parents had, and then I certainly had as a teacher, where sometimes the hardest kids, it's like the ones who are just really good students, like there's the kid in the film who's just on the ball. Yep. Always, and that's a certain type of rewarding experience working with kids like that. But then you get really, really invested in kids who are trickier to work with. Mm-hmm. And I just was always raised with this idea that you don't know why another person necessarily is acting a certain way, and also, and even though you don't know, you should try to understand. Right. And so I remember kids who I went to school with who just were having such a starkly different experience with school than I was, and talking again, it just all comes from my parents who would say, like, what else do you notice that student might be dealing with at home? And Levi, who played Shane, just immediately when he came out for the role, I said to him, I don't know if you're this kind of student. I had no way of knowing that, but I explained this kind of student, and he just got so fired up. He was like, and there are teachers who it's almost like they pick on these kids, and they're the worst kids that you would want to pick on because they already have like a hard time. And he just went off, and I was like, not only are you just seem really right for this role, for other reasons, emotionally, you get it.
There's empathy, which you don't see.
And he wasn't that kind of kid. He wasn't a difficult kid or a bully or anything, but he had empathy for them. And it was just like, I cannot believe how fortunate.
Wow,
because
that's
Vermont's
amazing.
A pretty small place, and the idea of I'm not getting a professional actor from New York City or anything. It was like, I need this kid in Vermont, and he was just amazing.
Yeah, his lived experience informed the role. Which is all you can ask for. Well, I can't let you go without again tapping into my real job at Middlebury College. I love the Easter eggs, the Middlebury Easter eggs, whether that is the diploma.
Yes.
I noticed the mug on in his cubicle peeking up over the edge.
Yeah.
And then the to me, the greatest Easter egg of all is the reveal of Anais Mitchell's song at the end.
Totally.
Can we talk about that, about having her?
Yeah, absolutely. I had written the scene to just songs that would just kind of play in my Spotify playlist, and in those early stages of just kind of visualizing a scene. And I've adored Anais since I went to Middlebury. I remember going to a show of hers in Burlington, and a friend saying, "No, she's like a really good, and she's from Vermont. And she went to Middlebury." And I was like, was she like actually good though, or like Vermont good?
Yeah.
And he was like, no, this is really good. And of course, the album that had just come out was Hadestown.
Yep.
I listened to Hadestown.
Of course.
I felt very vindicated on thinking that it's really awesome
Yeah.
years later when it
Yeah.
became a hit
But
Broadway
when,
musical.
I knew Aeneas when.
Yeah,
I knew
yeah.
Hadestown when, way before it won the Tony Award.
And
Yeah.
of course, again, like that small world of Vermont, her mom and my mom overlapped in their jobs. And I've never met Aeneas.
Yeah.
And my mom would be like, well, I do have... And
I have an in.
Yeah, and what eventually just happened was I reached out to her management and said who I was and what this project was. But there was a certain time I remember driving on the highway, like right off of the Burlington, of Burlington, and I've listened to Young Man in America, that album, for years. I mean, since it came out. But for some reason, 10 years after it came out or something like that, this song just really hit me.
Yep.
And I said, it's perfect
Yep.
for this, lyrically,
Yep.
but also emotionally.
Yep.
And years of making this film, I just was like, you have to get it looking good enough
Yep.
that it'll be feasible, that they'll give you the rights for this.
Right.
Yeah, and getting the rights for that, I just was like, whatever you ask, I will give, whatever needs to happen to get the rights to this song, because I just knew it was perfect and powerful.
Whether she has a connection to Middlebury or Vermont or not, it is perfect. It is perfect. But then when you recognize it, and she is a Vermonter. She grew up on a farm in New Haven, and
really
she's come back
inspiring.
and she's raising her kids here.
Yeah,
So
she is a huge inspiration to me as someone who is from Vermont and just lives for the idea of capturing an experience inside of a creative field.
Yep.
When I heard Hadestown for the first time, which was the first thing I heard of hers, I was just like, oh my God, I can smell Vermont. I can hear Vermont. It's everything about Vermont. And the fact that she has done so well, and I've seen her perform in Burlington, and I've seen her perform in Brooklyn, and I've seen her play in Broadway, and just seeing Aeneas Mitchell's name on Broadway, it was so inspiring of there is something about the experience of growing up here and living here that is worth capturing, and that people will want to engage with, is immensely inspiring to me.
I'm sure. Well, you've done that with Petal Fall.
Thank you very much.
That is what you
Thank
have
you so
done.
much.
You don't have to live here in Vermont to feel that.
Thanks.
And I wish you the best of luck both in teaching and filmmaking.
Thank you so
I
much.
have no doubt, based on your film and the conversation, you were an amazing teacher, so please keep doing that. But please keep making films
Thank you.
because they're really inspiring.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Thank you.
Great.